In 2019, Sydney opened its biggest new railway project in decades, Phase 1 of the futuristic new Sydney Metro. And next year, the second phase of this project is set to open as well, bringing this major new line directly into the Sydney CBD. A year after that, the line will be extended out west to Bankstown, connecting to a further 10 stations. And the plans don't stop there, with 2 other new metro lines being proposed as well. So this all sounds like an amazingly ambitious project, finally getting Sydney's rail network infrastructure to catch up to the decades of population growth that have happened since most of the network was built over 100 years ago. But there is a catch. The project has faced significant cost blowouts, with the current cost estimates for the third phase of the project, Sydney Metro West, being double what they were when the project was initiated. This has all caused the new state government of New South Wales to put the project under review, putting the future of Sydney Metro at risk. So in this video, I want to understand what Sydney's new metro system is all about. I also want to see if it's still worth going ahead with its future plans, and what changes, if any, could improve things. To understand why the Sydney Metro is so needed, I think it's worth taking a look back at Sydney's existing rail network. I'll keep this pretty brief so we can get back to the metro topic, but do let me know if you'd like to see a dedicated video on this in the future. Sydney's rail network is quite large. It features 170 train stations served by 9 train lines, numbered T1 through to T9, although the small T6 route has recently closed to be converted into light rail. Speaking of light rail, there are also 3 light rail lines, numbered L1 to L3, with another under construction. And while the following isn't true for all lines, most of Sydney's rail network is focused on bringing commuters from the city's vast western suburbs towards its central business district, or CBD, in the east. And herein lies the biggest challenge faced by Sydney's rail network. Most of the network is well over 100 years old, but the population of Sydney's western suburbs has increased dramatically since when the system was first built. And you can see that in these aerial photos from the 1940s. After the majority of the network was already built, where much of Western Sydney was sparsely populated and pretty rural, but is now filled with housing developments. The old rail network was simply not built with this kind of population in mind, and many new suburbs have been built very far away from existing rail connections, leaving them to rely on often unreliable and infrequent bus services. So this is where Sydney Metro comes in. It's going to give direct rail access to whole new communities. It will also significantly boost capacity for rail trips going from Sydney's west all the way through to its east, as well as within the very busy CBD. And finally, it will add new connections and transfer points, making journeys between Sydney's various hubs, and journeys that don't need to run through the CBD, even easier. The new metro will also bring modern design standards. These include level boarding at all stations, making the system much more accessible for people with limited mobility. And it will also have platform screen doors at all stations, for improved safety. In addition, the new driverless metro trains will do away with Sydney's enormous, but also quite iconic, double-deckers, for single-level trains with longitudinal seating and 6 doors per carriage. Trains that are more like what you see on other metro systems around the world. And these new trains should help reduce the amount of time the trains need to wait at stations for passengers to alight and board compared to Sydney's existing trains, theoretically allowing them to run more frequently during peak periods. So then, what are the various lines of the Sydney Metro? I think the most obvious one to start with is the one that opened first, Sydney Metro North West. The area called The Hills in Sydney's northwest is one of the city's fastest growing regions, but until recently it was one of Sydney's largest regions to rely exclusively on buses for its public transport. And these buses, particularly those running the express routes down the freeway towards the Sydney CBD, were prone to getting caught in rush hour traffic, making journeys unreliable. The Metro aimed to fix that, with 8 new stations along both elevated and underground tracks, running from Tallawong on the western edge towards the existing Epping station, where passengers can transfer to the existing T9 Northern Line, as well as regional trains to the Central Coast and Newcastle. From Epping, the route continues along the converted Epping to Chatswood rail link towards Chatswood. This link was originally opened in 2009 as part of Sydney's classic suburban rail network, to link the major stations of Chatswood and Epping, as well as provide 3 new stations in between to serve the important Macquarie Park business and shopping precincts and Macquarie University. But now the link has been converted to form part of the Metro network. Currently, the Metro terminates at Chatswood Station, a major business and shopping precinct in its own right, where commuters currently need to change to the T1 North Shore line if they want to continue travelling into the main Sydney CBD. Since the Metro's opening in 2009, the line has proven to be a major success, with ridership numbers performing well above expectations, and recovering strongly after the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's honestly little to complain about with this phase of the project, with one major exception. The line's western terminus at Tallawong is just over 3 kilometres from Schofield Station, missing out on what could be an excellent interchange opportunity with the existing T1 and T5 lines. This section of the line probably wouldn't be too expensive to build either, given it could be built entirely above ground on land that's mostly currently just used for farming. The channel, Building Beautifully, did a pretty good short summarising why the extension didn't get built, so I'll link to that in the description if you're interested. The government has expressed interest in extending the line out to St Mary's, presumably via Schofields, but there's been very little said on that topic and there are currently no plans to start construction anytime soon. And to start getting a little nitpicky, there's also the very big curves trains need to run down between Chatswood and North Ryde. This adds a lot of distance between the stations that doesn't really need to be there. But it's hard to blame this on the Metro project as it was built as part of the Epping to Chatswood rail link, and was done because of local opposition to the construction of a rail bridge over the Lane Cove River, which led to the government tunnelling under the river instead. So the curve is needed for trains to get deep enough to get under the river. This decision has also meant the platforms at the stations along the Epping to Chatswood part of the route are very far underground, and it takes quite some time to get from the ground level to the platform. So I can't say I'm not disappointed that the government at the time gave in to pressure and went with the more circuitous and more expensive tunnelled option rather than a simple rail bridge. There's also the issue of land use around the stations. A lot of the land around the new Metro stations is either parking for park and rides or single family homes. Given the huge cost of the Metro, I'd say that's a lot of money being spent to build a rail line that only a limited number of people can live nearby. Personally, I think the line could have seen even greater usage if more of the stations had been built alongside transit-oriented developments, and there was greater upzoning in existing suburbs near the stations. One final thing about the Northwest Metro I see people saying is that the stations are a bit far apart. Norwest and Hills Showground stations, for instance, are about 2.5 kilometers apart, which is similar to the other station distances. Typically, metros have closer stop distances, as they're built with the aim of allowing people to make short and fast journeys across densely populated cities. The average station distance on the Paris Metro, for example, is just 500 metres, which is 5 times shorter than those on the Sydney Metro. But Sydney's Metro does ultimately operate more like a commuter service, where the aim is to allow passengers to travel large distances between major hubs quickly, putting it more in line with systems like Paris's RER, where many of the lines also have average station distances about 2 to 3 kilometers apart. Many people even argue that Sydney's Metro isn't technically a metro in the linguistic sense, but I'm not really going to focus on semantics in this video. Okay, so I did find some things to complain about, but overall I can't take away from the fact that Metro Northwest has been a great addition to Sydney's transport network. But what's next for Sydney Metro? Well, in about a year's time, Phase 2 is expected to open. This will extend the Metro Northwest line south from Chatswood to new stations at Crow's Nest and Victoria Cross, before travelling under the harbour to the Sydney CBD, where it will have 4 stops at Barangaroo, Martin Place, where passengers can transfer to the existing T4 line, Gadigal, formerly called Pitt Street, and then Central Station, the state's main rail hub where passengers can transfer to all sorts of services, including almost all of Sydney's light, suburban, regional and interstate rail services. After Central, the Metro will make one more stop at the new Waterloo Station, before surfacing at Sydenham Station for another interchange with the T4 line as well as the T3 line. Speaking of the T3 line, about a year after the city section is opened, the T3 line will be converted into a metro line, allowing the metro to run along the rail corridor, serving its 10 existing stations all the way to Bankstown. The benefits of the city and southwest phase are mainly about capacity. The existing rail network through Sydney's CBD is heavily congested and frequently suffers from overcrowding. The system also has a bit of a reputation for being unreliable, with small disruptions managing to bring down the whole network way too frequently. Part of the reason for this is a lot of the different lines share tracks and stations, particularly within the CBD. So when something goes wrong on one line, it quickly cascades to all of them. The new Sydney Metro will be an independent system, so it shouldn't be as easily affected by issues on other lines. It will also double the rail capacity travelling across the Sydney Harbour. The only current connection is the 2 tracks on the Harbour Bridge, but this will be doubled to 4 with a new metro tunnel from Victoria Cross to Barangaroo. Additionally, with the T3 line's conversion to a metro, it will also be removed from the city circle. And much like the Metro Tunnel project in Melbourne, which I also did a video on if you're interested, I'll link to it somewhere on the screen, this will result in more capacity for the other existing lines that use this route, the T2 and T8 lines in this case. T3 Bankstown line passengers will also no longer be using the very busy stations on the city circle, especially Town Hall and Wynyard stations, which would help ease overcrowding issues. And of course, the new Metro City and Southwest will give passengers on the existing Metro Northwest a direct link into the CBD and beyond to the southwest without needing to change at Chatswood. Basically, the only critique I have of this leg of the project is the placement of some of the new stations outside of the Sydney CBD. Victoria Cross Station makes sense as it's serving the major North Sydney business district, but Crow's Nest Station I think could have been built a bit further away from the existing station at St Leonard's. The stations are being built about 500 metres apart, and while I can understand that they wanted the station close enough to the business and hospital precincts in that area, it does seem like a missed opportunity to expand rail coverage to more areas of the North Shore. Even just building the station a few more hundred metres away could have helped achieve this. Perhaps the more egregious example of this, in my opinion, is the new Waterloo station, which is about 600 metres from Redfern Station and 900 metres from Green Square, so in an area that's already pretty well served by the rail network. But just nearby there are a lot of fairly high density developments going up, without particularly good connections to the rail network. I think putting the new station somewhere like Zetland could have been better. Zetland is one of the fastest densifying areas in inner Sydney, and a lot of residents who live there are not within easy walking distance of a rail service. So while a station there might have been a little bit more of a detour than one at Waterloo, it would have benefited substantially more people while still achieving the goal of taking T3 passengers out of the overcrowded Redfern station. Something else worth mentioning about the conversion of the T3 Bankstown line to a metro is that they aren't converting the whole Bankstown line. The current T3 line extends beyond Bankstown to the stations of Yagoona and Birrong before branching off towards either Lidcombe or Liverpool. These sections of the line have been left out of the metro plans. Now, most of the stations along the line will still retain their direct services to the central business district, with the plans being to run trains along the existing line from Liverpool towards Lidcombe and then on to the city. But this does leave Yagoona and Birrong stations without direct services to the city. Instead, they'll be served by a shuttle service that will run between Bankstown and Lidcombe. One of the reasons the metro couldn't easily be extended along these two branches is that they often share tracks with freight trains, but while it would require more engineering works, I would like to see a small extension of the metro to at the very least Regent's Park or Sefton. That way these stations would regain their direct CBD services, and transfers from the metro to other services, such as services to Liverpool, would be much more convenient, not relying on a shuttle. The government did release a map suggesting that they want to extend the metro out towards Liverpool at some point, but the details on this are very vague and there are no plans to begin building anytime soon. Now, speaking of future plans for the metro, the government isn't, or at least wasn't, planning on stopping there. Early work has already begun on a new route between the city and Parramatta, and there are plans for other routes as well. I'm planning on doing another video about what the future holds for Sydney Metro, so subscribe if you want to see that. But, as I mentioned at the start of the video, some of these plans may be in trouble, with the government putting them under review. In my view, cancelling it would be a mistake. While I have laid out some issues I have with the way the Sydney Metro is and was being constructed, this doesn't take away from the fact that this is a great project and has finally put some momentum back into Sydney's public transport infrastructure construction. It's connecting whole new communities to high quality and high frequency public transport, while creating new interchange opportunities that facilitate more travel that doesn't need to pass through the CBD. It's also helping improve reliability, a big issue facing Sydney's railways, as well as significantly boosting capacity through key bottlenecks like the CBD and the harbour. And the results have spoken for themselves. While the project was expensive, ridership numbers have exceeded expectations, showing that there clearly is demand for new railways in Sydney. So, while I think there may be room to improve the plans for the future metro lines, it would be a major mistake for the government to cancel them outright. Let's not let Sydney return to another series of decades of rail stagnation. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. As I said, I'm planning a video on the potential future of Sydney's metro, so subscribe if you want to see that. But before I make that, I'd love to hear where you guys think new metro lines could be built. Personally, I think one to the Northern Beaches might be worthwhile. I'd also like to give a shout out to the channel Sydney Trains Vlogs. Quite a few of the clips in the background of this video came from that channel, so if you like them, go check them out. I'll put a link to it in the description. And of course, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. I'm City Moose, thanks for watching.